Amidst the millions of criminal cases around the world, there are a few names that mark their place in the list of unforgettable historical events such as this one. It was a daring heist, a mid-air escape under the cover of night, and a mystery that has confounded authorities and captivated the public for over half a century. This is the story of Dan Cooper, or as most of the people remember it, the B.Cooper hijacking case, a tale of intrigue, audacity, and enduring enigma. In the afternoon of November 24, 1971, a middle-aged man carrying a briefcase walked into Portland International Airport and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington. The man, along with 36 other passengers and a crew of 6, soon boarded Northwest Airlines Flight 305. Once aboard, he made himself comfortable in the middle of the last row of seats on the right side of the cabin. That gentleman was none other than Dan Cooper. He ordered a drink and had a smoke. Smoking was not seen as a problem back in the 70s. Once the flight was cleared for departure, Cooper turned around and handed an envelope to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Schaffner first confused it as an attempt to flirt with her and started leaving without opening the note. Cooper warned her that she might be mistaken about what's on that note. Inside the envelope was a note featuring a handwritten message stating he had a bomb. Cooper then asked her to sit beside him and do as instructed. Schaffner reluctantly sat down beside him and glimpsed what appeared to be 8 sticks of dynamite inside his briefcase. Cooper then informed the authorities about his demands without causing any chaos in the plane. He wanted $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. He also demanded a fuel truck to stand ready to refuel the aircraft once they landed in Seattle, in order to initiate his escape without any hurdles. In case they failed to comply with his demands, he threatened to, quote, do the job. Once the flight was airborne, Schaffner went to inform the cockpit crew while another flight attendant by the name of Tina Mucklow remained by Cooper's side to assist him at all times. By using a telephone in the rear of the cabin, Mucklow acted as an intermediary between Cooper and the rest of the flight crew for the remainder of the hijacking. Also, following Cooper's instructions for the next hour and a half, Flight 305 maintained a holding pattern near Seattle, while local and federal authorities scrambled to procure the ransom, as well as the 4 parachutes. 10,000 bills of $20 were collected from a local bank, while the owner of a nearby skydiving school supplied the chutes. At 5:45 p.m., more than 2 hours past its scheduled arrival, Flight 305, which was supposed to be a half-an-hour flight, finally touched down in Seattle. By this point, it was well after sunset, and the aircraft was brought to a remote section of the tarmac, away from the main crowd. Cooper allowed the 36 passengers to disembark, in exchange for his demands being fulfilled, along with the plane's fuel tank. The money and parachutes were handed over to Cooper. Only the flight crew remained aboard as the plane refueled. Cooper's instructions for escape were precise: a second flight to Mexico City at minimum speed and altitude, with the landing gear down and the flaps set at 15 degrees. He specified that the cabin remain unpressurized. The flight crew and 2 FAA officials were uncertain if the plane could make it to Mexico in a single flight, so they decided to refuel before the final destination. As such, Cooper proposed a refueling stop in Phoenix, Yuma, or Sacramento, before they all agreed on Reno, Nevada. At 7:40 p.m., the plane took off again, heading southward. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, less than 5 minutes after takeoff, Cooper told Mucklow to head for the cockpit, and that from this point onwards he was not to be disturbed. That was the last time she saw Cooper. A mere 36 minutes into the flight, the aft stairway was lowered. Cooper leaped into the stormy night, vanishing into legend. The flight landed safely in Reno around 3 hours later, but Cooper was long gone by then. All he left behind was 2 parachutes, a black clip-on tie, and 8 cigarette butts. The FBI launched one of the most extensive manhunts in history. Cooper was described by the crew and passengers as a white male with brown eyes and dark hair. He appeared to be in his mid-40s and wore a dark trench coat, a dark suit, a white shirt, a black tie, and dark shoes. Soon after boarding, he'd also donned a pair of sunglasses. Based on this description, the FBI produced the first of several composite sketches. They scoured the rugged terrain of southern Washington, particularly around the Lewis River and the Tina Bar area. Military aircraft, ground teams, and local law enforcement joined the search, but Cooper had seemingly vanished without a trace. The last communication with the hijacker occurred at approximately 8 or 5 p.m. when the crew used the intercom to offer assistance, which Cooper declined. Within the next 10 minutes, the crew experienced what they described as an oscillation or vibration of the aircraft. He never specified a route which the FBI could track. In fact, he got so impatient by the slow refueling of the plane that he denied the captain's request to plan which route should be taken to Reno. And even though they knew the drop location planned by him, he could never have landed precisely on that location due to the unsteerable parachute given to him to sabotage his escape. The night was also reported as one of the stormiest ones of that pilot's career, so finding Cooper among that suspected area was like finding a needle in the haystack. Despite their best efforts, authorities never managed to find a single trace of Cooper, nor the items he'd brought along with him. Frustrated by little to no progress made on this case, the FBI decided to take deeper and more complicated measures. They had the serial numbers of the notes handed to Cooper, which they decided to inform the public about through national newspapers, and they put a reward on any information about them. Almost a decade after following a cold trail trying to catch a ghost, the FBI finally found a clue. A few ransom bills were discovered years later near the Columbia River, and a placard from the 727's aft stairs by a young boy named Brian Ingram, who was there trying to build a campfire on a small beach in southern Washington. The money matched the serial numbers provided by the FBI, but Cooper's fate remained elusive. But how did the money end up so far from the drop zone? The FBI first suspected that Cooper might have mistakenly dropped the bundles in the Lewis River, which might have been carried further downstream by the Columbia River, before finally being washed ashore at Tina Bar, which is the beach where the kid found it. But there seemed to be a small problem in this assumption. The Columbia River flows in the opposite direction. This completely changed their reported initial drop location mark, and the whole case progress came back to zero. But again, there was another small issue with this new breakthrough. How could 3 separate bundles have landed at the same place? This opened the doors to a possibility that Cooper might have been there himself, because one thing was for clear: the bundles were deliberately placed there to mislead the cops. But was it Cooper himself who placed them? Did he make someone else go there for him? Or did someone else find Cooper's corpse and wanted to get away with the money? The FBI had a huge suspicion that Cooper probably did not survive the escape under those tremendously dangerous circumstances. Flight 305 was plowing through a frigid rainstorm at roughly 170 knots, 10,000 feet above southern Washington. The wind was so violent that it ripped out a placard from the aft stairway, and on top of that, Cooper was not even dressed properly for the occasion. It's widely believed that Cooper demanded 2 pairs of parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, to make the authorities believe that he intended to take a hostage. That is precisely what happened, as the FBI contemplated but eventually decided against sabotaging the chutes, as they did not want to risk the life of an innocent civilian. But in their haste to obtain them, they unintentionally provided Cooper with a non-functional dummy parachute intended for training purposes. This mishap seems to have gone unnoticed by Cooper because that dummy chute was one of the 2 missing from the plane. Cooper's chances of survival were close to none. But then came the continuous trail of hijackers following the same pattern as Cooper and managing to survive under worse situations. Unfortunately for them, they couldn't hide from the hands of the law for too long and usually got caught within a week or 2. This at least made it clear that there is a really high possibility of Cooper being alive and well. On the other hand, authorities never received a missing persons report matching the description of Cooper in the wake of the hijacking. There's at least one other reason to suspect that Cooper had a military background. While the flight was in a holding pattern near Seattle, Cooper mentioned that the McChord Air Force Base was only 20 minutes away from the Seattle-Tacoma Airport. At the time, that was an accurate assessment and might suggest a military background. Apart from the potential military connections, Cooper may even have had links to the Central Intelligence Agency. This suspicion took place because the type of aircraft which Cooper chose to hijack, a Boeing 727, was also used by the CIA to covertly drop agents and supplies during the Vietnam War, a task for which the Boeing 727 was uniquely qualified due to its distinctive aft stairway. So it's fairly safe to assume that Cooper chose to hijack a Boeing 727 specifically because it provided a relatively safe means of escape. Whether he learned of this from the CIA or came to that conclusion independently is another question. He seemed to know a great deal about aircraft and aviation. All of this couldn't be just a random coincidence. He also appeared to be familiar with the local terrain. The B.Cooper case generated a vast amount of public interest and numerous suspects. Over the years, the FBI has investigated thousands of leads and hundreds of potential suspects. Among the most notable suspects was a man in Portland with initials DB and surname Cooper. This Cooper was quickly eliminated as a suspect, but due to a mix-up by the press, the name Dan Cooper was confused for D.B. Cooper. Some other suspects who came close to Cooper's characteristics were Richard Floyd McCoy, who hijacked a plane in a similar fashion 5 months later. McCoy used a fake name. He used a fake hand grenade to threaten the crew. He used handwritten notes to issue his demands. Both McCoy and Cooper used the phrase "no funny stuff" as a warning to the crew. McCoy, a former Green Beret, was eventually captured, but significant differences in methods and descriptions led many to dismiss him as Cooper. Other suspects included Dwayne Weber, who allegedly confessed to being Cooper on his deathbed. He supposedly told his wife, "I've got a secret to tell you. I am Dan Cooper." Following his deathbed confession, Weber's widow recalled a number of fascinating details. She claims to have found a bank bag resembling the one used in the hijacking. She claims Weber had sustained a knee injury after jumping out of a plane. Weber supposedly had a nightmare about leaving his fingerprints on the aft stairs. And a year before the money was discovered at Tina Bar, Weber had allegedly paid a quick visit to the same location. In addition, Weber was a World War II veteran. He had an extensive criminal record. He matched a physical description, and he was 47 years old in 1971. On the other hand, Weber's fingerprints did not match any of the prints collected from Flight 305. Although, to be fair, there's no way to know if any of those prints actually belonged to Cooper. Another potential suspect was Kenneth Christensen. His brother noticed certain parallels between him and Cooper. Christensen had briefly served as a paratrooper in World War II, and since 1953, he'd worked for Northwest Airlines as both a mechanic and a flight attendant. He was 45 years old at the time of the hijacking. He was left-handed, which Cooper might have been. For instance, Cooper used his left hand to interact with his briefcase, and the clip-on tie he left on board was affixed with a tie clasp applied from the left. Shortly before he died in 1994, Christensen had supposedly told his brother, "There is something you should know, but I cannot tell you." After his passing, his family discovered over $200,000 in his bank accounts. To top it all off, Florence Schaffner stated that photographs of Christensen bore a strong resemblance to Cooper. On the other hand, Christensen did not match the physical description of Cooper. He was both shorter and lighter. While Schaffner did see a strong resemblance, she remarked that Cooper had more hair, and that is supported by the composite sketches. And there was nothing suspicious about the large sums of money, which he'd simply earned by selling land. Each suspect presented tantalizing possibilities, but lacked definitive evidence. One theory states that Cooper had his men in the law enforcement authorities helping him, and the reason to suspect that was, if you recall, 8 cigarette butts were collected from the scene, and there's a good chance they were all suffused with Cooper's DNA. The problem is that evidence was lost at some point and has not turned up since. Was it lost by somebody's mistake or somebody's betrayal? There is no solid proof, But this theory is backed up by some strongly supporting incidents like this one. The B.Cooper hijacking has permeated American culture, inspiring books, movies, and even songs. Cooper has become a folk hero of sorts, a symbol of rebellion against authority, and the ultimate master of escape. Books like D.B. Cooper, What Really Happened by Max Gunther, and Skyjacker, The Hunt for D.B. Cooper by Jeffrey Gray delves into the intricacies of the case. Movies and TV shows have dramatized the events, each adding its spin on the mysterious figure. In popular media, Cooper is often depicted as a cunning and charismatic outlaw, a modern-day Robin Hood who pulled off the perfect crime. This romanticized view contrasts sharply with the reality of the FBI's relentless yet fruitless pursuit. Advances in forensic science, including DNA analysis, have been applied to the case. The FBI has Cooper's tie left on the plane, which they have tested for DNA. Though inconclusive, these efforts keep the hope alive that a breakthrough might one day come. In 2016, the FBI announced it was closing the active investigation, redirecting resources to more pressing matters. Despite this, amateur sleuths and professional investigators continue to seek answers to many unsolved questions. Was Cooper really in his mid-40s, or did he simply look old for his age? Did Cooper really serve in the military? He might be watching this video right now and having a good laugh. Who knows? What are your thoughts on this story? Do you believe in Cooper's death? Or are you still hoping his true fate would come out one day in public? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. We will see you in the next mind-blowing forgotten crime story. Until then, goodbye. Thanks for watching.